The Reformation, Lecture 2.1. The Protestant Reformation was a 16th century religious and political revolution that disrupted the reign of the Catholic Church in Europe. It also set structures and beliefs in place that exist in today's modern era. Causes of the Reformation. Corruption in the Catholic Church was a major cause of the Reformation. This included simony, the sale of church offices, pluralism, an official holding more than one office at a time, absenteeism, an official not participating in the benefices but receiving payment and privileges, nepotism, favoring family members in the appointment of church offices, clerical ignorance, where many priests were virtually illiterate, and also the moral decline of the papacy, as with Pope Alexander VI, who had numerous affairs and children out of wedlock. Critics of the Church who took part in causing the Reformation emphasized personal relationship with God as primary. John Wycliffe, from England, stated that the Bible was the sole authority. He foreshadowed Martin Luther's views in the early 16th century. John Huss' ideas were similar to Wycliffe. He was a religious leader in Bohemia who led a nationalist movement there. Unfortunately, he was burned at the stake by the church for his heretical views. Erasmus, who wrote The Praises of Folly, was also a critic. He criticized the corruption in the church and the hypocrisy of the clergy. A contemporary once remarked that Erasmus laid the idea that Martin Luther later hatched. Impact of the Renaissance. In the Northern Renaissance, Christian humanists criticized the Church and questioned the validity of the Latin Vulgate, or the Catholic Bible. In the Italian Renaissance, it was marked by a de-emphasis on religion, and it also emphasized secularism, and individualism among high church leaders. Technologies, the printing press facilitated the spread of humanism, and Protestantism was more easily spread. Martin Luther was a reform-minded Augustinian monk who taught at the University of Wittenberg in Saxony. He was loyal to the Catholic Church until seeing Johann Tetzel selling indulgences. Indulgences were payments that would reduce a person's punishment in purgatory, or perhaps the pain of a loved one who had already died. Tetzel was authorized to sell these by Pope Leo X, and the Pope was looking for additional revenues to pay for the construction of Michelangelo's dome in St. Peter's. Luther was angered by this, and this sprung the idea of the Reformation. Soon after, Luther published the 95 Theses in 1517. Luther criticized the selling of indulgences, but went further than others before him by questioning the scriptural authority of the Pope to grant indulgences in the first place. The printing press was a major factor that facilitated the spread of Luther's work with astonishing speed. In 1520, Luther published his theology of reform in 3 separate works. His major ideas included that salvation could be achieved through faith alone, and that the Bible was the sole authority, as well as only 2 sacraments, baptism and communion, were valid. It also had the idea that the church consisted of a priesthood for all believers, not just a hierarchical structure, and Christians were not subject to the Pope's interpretation of the Bible. In response to Luther's teaching, Pope Leo X excommunicated Luther in 1520. At the Diet of Worms, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, demanded that Luther recant his writings. Luther refused, quoting, "Here I stand, I can do no other." At the Edict of Worms, Luther was outlawed as a heretic by the Holy Roman Emperor. Luther was then saved by agents of Frederick III and was taken back to his castle, where he was protected and continued to write to spread his ideals. Conflict over Lutheranism. Many German states in the north turned to Lutheranism, and many German princes were politically motivated. They can now escape the authority of the Catholic Church and confiscate the Church's land for the state's benefit. Denmark and Sweden became Lutheran states as well. Despite this, Lutheranism did not spread much beyond northern Germany and Scandinavia. In the German Peasants' Revolt, otherwise known as the Peasants' War, between 1524 and 1525, German peasants demanded an end of serfdom and other practices of feudalism that oppressed the peasantry. Many of these peasants were inspired by Lutheranism. Ironically, Luther's views on the peasant movement were somewhat conservative, and Luther instead took the side of the German princes. Charles V, or Charles I of Spain, sought to stop Protestantism and preserve the hegemony of Catholicism. In this sense, Charles was similar to a medieval emperor in that he was trying to maintain religious unity in Europe. He was now allied with the Pope and trying to stamp out this heresy. The League of Smalkalden was formed by newly Protestant, or Lutheran, princes to defend themselves against Charles V's drive to re-Catholicize Germany. Francis I of France allied with the League, despite being Catholic, because France tried to keep Germany divided. And despite this, France was still Catholic. France in the end just wanted to bring an end to the Holy Roman Empire. In the Peace of Augsburg of 1555, the peace temporarily ended the struggle in Germany over Lutheranism. Princes in Germany could choose either Protestantism or Catholicism, and Protestants living in Catholic states were allowed to move to Protestant states. The same was true of Catholics living in Protestant states. It resulted in a permanent religious division of Germany, and it essentially reaffirmed the independence of many German states. The spread of Protestantism. Anabaptists. Anabaptists were a voluntary association of believers with no connection or allegiance to any state. They got the name because they opposed childhood baptism, and they believed baptism should only occur for adults. They alienated many groups, and because of this, at the tragedy of Munster, combined armies of Protestant and Catholic forces captured the city of Anabaptist leaders and executed them. Ulrich Zwingli was a swift reformer. He adopted Lutheranism and established what amounted to a theocracy in Zurich. In contrast to Luther, he saw Eucharist as only symbolic, and that Luther's view of the real presence was too Catholic in its foundation. At the colloquy of Marburg in 1529, Zwingli officially split with Luther over the issues of Eucharist. Calvinism. John Calvin was a Frenchman who was influenced by humanism. In his beliefs of predestination, he thought that since God is all-knowing, he already knows who is going to heaven and who is destined for hell. The elect are church members who have their conversion experience and go to heaven, while the rest go to hell. Calvin established a theocracy in Geneva in 1540. Geneva became the new center of the Reformation in Europe, and Geneva was home to Protestant exiles from England, Scotland, France, and who later returned to their countries with Calvinist ideas. The Protestant work ethic. Calvinists later emphasized the importance of hard work and accompanying financial success as a sign that God was pleased. The spread of Calvinism had a far greater impact on future generations than Lutheranism. At the Presbyterianism Church, it was established in Scotland by John Knox, and it became the dominant religion of this area. Huguenots were French Calvinists who were brutally suppressed in France. They were especially strong amongst the nobility, although Calvinism saw converts from every social class. Puritans in England. They pressurized Elizabeth I for more reforms, but were largely kept at bay. They later established colonies in America in a region that became later known as New England. Calvinism did not spread to Ireland, Spain, and Italy, as they remained heavily Catholic. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe for more content.